Hi, my name's Simon Meacher from Engaging Data, and in this video I'm going to show you how to use Microsoft Teams to send out notifications from your data warehouse. Over my career, I've used things like VB scripts and PowerShell scripts and Python scripts that would sit alongside my data warehouse and be called, so I can then take the message from the data warehouse and push it out to a script file, which will then send it on to the mail server. I've also used things like DB Mail, which sit inside the functionality of a SQL server, and I can use that within T-SQL. Fantastic. These things are all good, but the way in which communication is being consumed by end users is changing. Email is still a primary tool for communication for most of the clients we speak to. However, in the day-to-day running of things, the BAU side of running a data warehouse, we find there's being a shift of people using Teams or Slack to manage little bits of work, little bits of communication, and to really react very quickly to change. So with this shift of consuming information in slightly different platforms, we came up with a method where we could utilize our existing functionality, but just change the endpoint, change the way in which we send the information out to the end users. And in Teams, it turns out to be relatively simple. So Microsoft Teams, as I'll show in a moment, will have a connector which enables you to create a webhook and send all the messages for that channel to that webhook. Nice and straightforward. That means these webhooks can be created per channel. So if you've got one channel for all your BAU activity, you can send it all to that. If you have a channel for the business team and you want to send them a notification to say, yep, data's ready, off you go and consume, you can create that. So you can create varied methods of sending out communication. So we're going to look at how do we attach it to an existing job. So if a job fails, we get notified. If a job's successful, we get notified of the success. But there's nothing stopping you taking this idea, breaking it down and fitting it into your organization, making it work for you and the way that your company would like to consume notifications from the data warehouse. So with all that said, let's head over to my desktop. I'll show you how to configure Teams connectors, so we create the endpoint and then we'll start sending communication to that team channel. So in order to send notifications to Teams, we need to configure a Teams channel to include a connector. So what I'm going to do is I have this data automation group here. I'm going to create a new channel . So now we have this channel. What I'm going to do in here is I need to add a connector. So inside the settings, go to the connectors, and what I'll be looking for in here is something called webhook. And you have incoming webhooks. Now this is something designed by Microsoft. So we will add that in here, and the configuration page is quite straightforward. What we have to do here is create or add the connector. So we'll search for webhooks and we'll configure. So now we have the configuration. So we're going to give it a name. We're going to customize the image. So I've changed the image of the webhook to show a little icon, and every time a post is created through this webhook, this is the image you'll see. Now, when this creates the webhook, you'll receive a URL. This is the important bit. So we're going to copy this from the clipboard and we're going to use that later on. Now, this channel, notifications for the data warehouse, has been configured to receive messages, and we can see that the automation has set up. The webhook has been created and there's been a post into the channel posts to show that. So if we take a look at the template code that we have here, now obviously I haven't gone to the extent just yet to include all of the try, catch and error handling that you'd expect, but this is just a simple example to give you an idea of the steps you need to go through. You can wrap it up in error handling afterwards before we go to production. I've parameterized a lot of these to use text files, and that's really to make sure that I don't give away any of our username, passwords or internal URLs. So in this webhook URL.txt file, we're going to copy and paste the URL that we saved from Teams into this file, and that's going to go into the variable and be used to send the notification to that endpoint, that webhook. Username will be the AD username of the user, and then the secure password, make sure you use a password. Of course, you can put in the plain text password, but most of you security people will get a bit upset storing passwords in code. The tenant URL or admin URL we have here will be the root URL for all of your SharePoint sites and Teams, and then the site URL will be the specific site URL for your Teams channel. So generally that looks something similar to a SharePoint URL for people who aren't familiar with that. PNP Online is a module available through PowerShell which will need to be installed before you can get this code to work. Then we use PNP to connect and do the authentication. So it will connect to the admin tenant and it will pass you the credentials and authenticate. I've selected or elected to create a multi-line variable for the actual notification itself. And in here, this is a JSON format style of notification. You've got lots of different types. There's loads of different websites that can help you format what you send to Teams and what Teams will display. But what I've elected to do with this is create a few anchor points that I will then in a subsequent line replace out with values. So for instance, the sequence number, if I was to say, okay, this is sequence number 007, then in this line on line 52, it will replace out the word sequence number with 007. If I wanted to put the process has failed. Okay, so we'll start to see all of this information being swapped out. It's just a simpler way of using a standard format template and then using that for each of the job notifications. Of course, if you wanted to, you could create a success and fail and have slightly different messages, but it depends on what you want to notify your users, your target audience about. If you're only interested in notifying about errors, then you're going to make this have as much information about the error as possible, so you people can start the process of bug finding and fixing. If you want to do a summary, you might choose something a slightly different color. You've got different color themes, you can add pictures and all that sort of stuff. The world's your oyster. Some of the things you can't do, create tables of information, and traditionally that's what I'd like to send out using emails, a table of here's what's gone wrong, here's the steps that have gone wrong, but there are lots of different ways of getting around that. It's just a format issue. So once that notification string has been finished, I'll write it to the window, and then I'm going to send that out as a REST post out to the web hook, and then we'll see what that looks like when it turns up on Teams. Now, in the PowerShell scripts that we've developed for our data warehouse, we've gone a step further. We've created a call to the database where we can collect the information from existing stored procedures that are used to create our body of the email that we normally send out. And what we're going to do is we're going to collect that information back in, put it into a variable inside of PowerShell, and then we're going to use it to replace out the anchor message 1 as we're going to set the variable HTML raw data, and that will then fill up the body of the Teams notification with the details of the job. We've also changed the PowerShell script to have arguments at the top, or parameters at the top of the script, so that when our job scheduler server calls the PowerShell script, it will pass over some vital information. So we've set up two things. The first one is we're going to get the job sequence number, because that can be passed through to our database call, so we can collect all the information about that job. And the other thing we're going to do is a little message that comes from the job scheduler that just says this is a pass or this is a fail. But of course, Within PowerShell, you can parameterize and create arguments as much as you need to tailor it to what you want. So we've used Warescape Red to build out our data warehouse, and this tool is absolutely incredible for speeding up development of data warehouses and automating all the jobs, all the code standards that you'll need. And if I open up a job, this is a standard job, it's not currently working, you can see that in the bottom here we have the success command and the failure command. These are sort of command line windows, so whatever you put in here, imagine it's like a bat file, that Red will deal with it like a bat file. So I'm using a bat command to open up PowerShell, calling the notification that I've just created using the previous step. I'm going to hand over one of the arguments. I'm going to hand over the job sequence number, which will then be used to collect the results of that job or the failure of that job. And then I've got another argument in there that's just now enabling me to say job failed. So if I wanted to, I can put one up here. If I'm happy to see success and failure messages, I can then change this to include a success message. So just to recap, now whenever this job runs, whether it's a success or failure, we're going to get a notification in our team to say what's what. So if we remember, this is job 010 load. Let's fire it off and see what happens. So here we are in Teams, and you can see the jobs come through. We've got the sequence number, you can see the date and time that it's been fired off, and the argument that we put into the job saying it's a success. And we've also, in the stored procedure, created a bullet point list of all the details. So we have the name of the task and when it was completed. Teams is quite good at folding it up, but you can scroll down and we've got everything down here. You may only want to see failures. If you're creating a failure email, you may only want to zoom into the bit that's failed and then link people over. You can embed URLs if you've got a dashboard that's showing you more detail about the failure, or if you want to throw people back into Warescape Red so that they can investigate further. You can configure the message to show whatever you like, really. So there you have it. We've set up Teams to receive messages from our data warehouse using a webhook connector within Teams and a PowerShell script file on our Warescape Red scheduler server to take the data and all the notifications from our processing and our jobs and send it out to Teams channel. I hope you can see how flexible this solution is and how many options it gives you as far as the teams and the audiences that you can send your notifications out to. So hopefully you found this useful. Please like the video, please subscribe to our channel, and if you've got any comments or questions, leave them in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.